What an amazing episode. Hardly any action scenes, but still just pure Star Wars, and I loved the lore we were presented with. Without further delay, let's get into the video. We begin where we left Ahsoka and Huyang inside the mouth of a Purgle as they continue their journey to this other galaxy. The visual effects of the hyperspace travel are amazing, and unlike anything we have seen in Star Wars to date. Ahsoka is reflecting on her time at the Jedi Temple with the Huyang, as he recalls stories he would tell the younglings, History of the Galaxy, Parts 1, 2, and 3. Ahsoka says Part 1 was the best, of course. I can't help but think Filoni is referencing the Skywalker saga. He's a prequel lover too. Ahsoka confides in Huyang what she didn't tell Hera, and that is Sabine going willingly with the enemy. She has been thinking about this in some detail as she worries about what side Sabine is on now. Changing the subject, she asks Huyang to tell her one of those stories from the Jedi Temple. He complies, beginning it with those beautiful famous words, "A long time ago in a galaxy far, far away." We don't see Ahsoka or Huyang for the rest of the episode, which I kind of expected, a bit of a reverse of last week's episode. Baylan checks in with Sabine in her prison cell on board the Eye of Sion as he makes his way to the bridge, joining Morgan and Shin. Asked if he intends on keeping his promise to Sabine, although impatient, he believes she can still be of some use to them. I believe he'll want to use her as bait to locate Ezra as well. They emerge from hyperspace at a planet named Peridia, located in this new galaxy where Thrawn and Ezra have been stranded. Casting our minds back to episode 2, Baylan mentioned the pathway to Peridia when inspecting the star map on Cetos. It was an ancient Jedi legend. Morgan Elsbeth elaborates by saying it was the homeworld of her ancestors, the Dathomiri. We can see where her home planet got its name from. Baylan speaks about the Purgles, saying Peridia was the end of a migration route for them, as Morgan says the Dathomiri were the first to harness and ride them. I would say that's a safe assumption how they arrived in the galaxy we have known and inhabited Dathomir. The Purgles will go to Peridia to die, as we see the ring occupying the planet full of bones. Sabine is taken out of her cell as she joins Morgan, Shin and Baylan in a smaller ship, heading to the planet's surface. We get our first look at the landscape as we see its dark nature, as well as these screaming witch-like statues. It has a very ancient, creepy vibe to it, and honestly reminds me a bit of the Zepho from Fallen Order. They land on a platform at what looks like a compound, where we see 3 witches standing within a henge that is very similar to the one on Cetos. They wear similar headpieces to Mother Talzin, and this is confirmed when Morgan greets one of them as Great Mother, saying she reeks of Jedi and is dangerous. The Mother's imprisoned Sabine. Baylan and Shin remain at the henge, looking into the distance where Baylan speaks to his almost amazement at this place, saying this is a land of dreams and madness. Shin says she knows no such stories, as it is confirmed that she wasn't raised at the temple. Baylan tells Shin how he watched everything he knew burn, talking about Order 66 of course. So we know he was in or around the temple at the time of the 501st Invader launching their assault. He speaks of the cycles he has experienced, the fall of the Jedi, the rise and the fall of the Empire. It repeats itself. Baylan is seeking something greater, the beginning, he says. Before, when he referenced the cycles he had witnessed, that gives me the feeling that he wants something long-lasting, or eternal even. If the old stories are true, then he'll find that beginning here. Something, or someone, is definitely calling out to him, only time will tell who though. But I'll say that I'm a fan of it being the sun from Mortis. After all, in Norse mythology, Skoll is a wolf that chases the sun, as in the big ball of fire. What if Filoni has swapped that out for a different kind of sun? Sabine questions what she is doing as she again attempts to use the Force on the prison door. The walls begin to rumble, which she thinks is her using the Force, however she turns around to see Thrawn's Chimera Star Destroyer approaching. Parts of it have been restored with gold plating, it appears. The hangar bay lands over the henge as we see night troopers led by Enoch chanting Thrawn. Captain Enoch wears a modified helmet with a gold face, which I'm getting Roman vibes from. I believe these night troopers are undead beings, resurrected by the Great Mothers using magic. My theory is that the purpose of Marok's existence was to softly introduce this as a concept. The red bandaging on them in various places also further alludes to this, as red material is typically used on Night Sister and Mother's clothing. Thrawn's theme plays as we get our first look at him in live action, marching down the middle of his night troopers standing to attention. He mentions the deal he has with the Great Mothers when talking about transporting the cargo, which looks a lot like a coffin. I wonder if the deal they have was for the Great Mothers to give Thrawn this undead army, and in exchange there are dead Night Sisters in those coffins which will be transported to Dathomir to be revived. Morgan introduces Baylan and Shin to Thrawn, where he recognises Baylan immediately as General Baylan Skoll of the Jedi Order. I believe this speaks to how well known Baylan was throughout the Clone Wars, hence why Thrawn knew who he was immediately. Sabine is brought to Thrawn where he thanks her for his escape from exile. He realises her motivation to do so was finding Ezra, and plays on her self-doubt, telling her that she has gambled the fate of her galaxy on the belief that Ezra is alive. He honours the deal Baylan made with her, as he returns her weapons, as well as providing his latest intel on Ezra's location, as well as a ride, which we see is a howler. I'm not sure how to describe it other than a bit of a dog, wolf, rat hybrid. Enoch warns Sabine of the ruthlessness of the wastelands as nomads prey upon each other. This reminds me of the Junlan wastes on Tatooine. Sabine departs on her howler into the wastelands as Thrawn, Morgan, Baylan and Shin watch on. Thrawn orders Baylan to follow her at his own pace. Shin seems a bit taken aback by this, almost with a level of concern for Sabine, questioning her master about his intent to honour his deal. Thrawn lets her in on their larger plan, using Sabine to find Ezra Ezra with the intent of her and Baylan destroying them both. Shin's discontent at this is further foreshadowing at her turning to the light in the future, I believe. Sabine comes to a stop as her howler appears to be sensing something. She uses a scanner which is very similar to the one Han Solo uses in The Empire Strikes Back when searching for Luke Skywalker on Hoth, before it is shot out of her hands by a nomad. The Mandalorian warrior in her comes to the forefront when battling these nomads, using her Beskar armor and her 2 pistols, before switching to her lightsaber and making light work of them. Baylan and Shin depart on their own howlers in search of Sabine as we see the night troopers loading this coffin-looking cargo onto the Chimera. Captain Enoch informs Thrawn that the mercenaries have left in search of Sabine, to which Thrawn tells him to prepare 2 squads to support them. Morgan Elsbeth wonders if 2 squads is enough, to which the Grand Admiral says that he doesn't care what happens to Ezra and Sabine, or even Baylan and Shin for that matter. His primary objective is to escape this galaxy, which really gives us an insight into how ruthless and cold Thrawn can be. The Howler returns to Sabine after running away when the nomads attacked her. She's angry with it for abandoning her, however she gives it a second chance and they go on their way. During their travel, the Howler stops as it can sense something again, but this time it is a food source. It licks a rock when it jumps up, revealing the rock to be a creature's shell, which we come to know as a Noti. The Noti reminds me a lot of a hermit crab. It is very timid at first before Sabine crouches down, reassuring the Noti that it was safe and no harm would come to it. It points to the Rebellion logo on Sabine's shoulder armor, appearing to recognize it, as it reveals a necklace also displaying the logo of the Rebellion. Wondering how that's possible, Sabine's mind jumps to Ezra, asking the Noti if it knows him. The Noti calls out as several others emerge, and she asks them all the same question again. Repeating the name Ezra Bridger back to her appears to confirm they know him, as they guide Sabine to their village. This reminded me a lot of when Leia befriended the Ewok Wicket in Return of the Jedi, who then took her to his village. Baylan and Shin come across the location where Sabine took down the nomads, coming to the conclusion that she survived. We get some really interesting dialogue here. Shin asks her master if he knew of Ezra, to which Baylan says he was too young, but continues on, saying Ezra comes from a breed of Boken Jedi, explaining this means he was trained in the wild after the fall of the Jedi Temple. Shin relates this to herself, however Baylan puts a stop to that, saying Ezra was trained as a Jedi, and he trained Shin to be more than that. She asks him if he misses the temple, to which he replies that he misses the idea of it, but not the weakness. This is absolutely true, because the Jedi were once keepers of the peace but were turned into soldiers. They became puppets of Palpatine, controlled by politics, and couldn't see the bigger picture as the shroud of the dark side fell. Shin is appearing to be less content with the idea of staying on this planet as she points to the Great Mother's eagerness to leave, saying maybe they should too. Baylan sees a future here though, theorizing that perhaps the Great Mother's fear a power greater than their own, saying that something calls to him. As I mentioned before, I'm a fan of the theory where this turns out to be the sun, and we get some Mortis links here. More bandits, the same as the ones Sabine defeated, appear in the distance atop a hill, where Baylan relaxes Shin, telling her that the enemy of their enemy is their friend for now. This may be foreshadowing a potential alliance formed between them to confront Ezra and Sabine. Arriving at the Noti's village, Sabine walks through it, meeting their community before she hears a familiar voice saying, "I knew I could count on you." She turns around to see her old friend, Ezra, as they share a warm embrace. He thanks her for coming, saying he can't wait to get out of there. She sighs, probably pointing to her not wanting to tell him exactly how she got there. Thrawn meets with the Great Mothers as they tell him another Jedi is on their way, riding with the Travelers, of course referencing the Purgles. He wonders if it could be the recently deceased Ahsoka Tano. However, Morgan tells him that Baylan assured her of Ahsoka's death. He says that death and resurrection are a common deception used by both Night Sister and Jedi, and that because Baylan was once a Jedi, they must treat him as flawed. Thrawn's super tactical side emerges here, as he says to believe she is alive until otherwise has been proved, and they will plan accordingly, wanting to know every last detail about Ahsoka and her background. He doesn't appear to know she was the apprentice of Anakin Skywalker. Thrawn turns to the Great Mothers, saying he will once again require the use of their dark magic. Once again obviously implies that he has already used it, which as I've already mentioned, I believe was to create his army of undead night troopers. There are so many possibilities as to what he wishes to use it for this time. Perhaps he wants to create another Force user to combat Ahsoka, but using his cunning tactical abilities will tailor it to her especially. Maybe someone like a Maul or something. If he went as far as Anakin or Vader, that would just be insane. We've seen variants of something in this realm done on Dathomir in the Clone Wars. This was an awesome episode. Not a whole lot of action, but heaps of lore, and the introduction of Thrawn and Ezra in live action was unbelievable. I cannot wait for episode 7 next week. I hope we'll get to see Ezra talk more about his journey on Peridia, and how Thrawn and him became separated. I'm also really curious about his glowing blue eyes. Perhaps this could point to some special Force powers he has developed in his time stranded here. Baylan and Shin are two of the most intriguing characters in Star Wars in a long time, and I cannot wait to learn more about them. Baylan talked more about his motivation and what he seeks, but I think it almost left me with more questions than answers. We'll see Ahsoka arrive, and I cannot wait to see her reactions to this new galaxy. As for Thrawn and what he has planned with using the Great Mother's dark magic, I've already stated one of my ideas, but really, the possibilities are endless, and I cannot wait to see what eventuates. Till next time, may the Force be with you, always.